He deserves you more than I ever could. I heard the words, but the room seemed to hear them first. My wife, Claire, sat across from me at our anniversary dinner, her hand resting beside a man named Ryan. She wasn't whispering. She wanted me to understand. The restaurant was warm, crowded, full of silverware and low conversation. Yet the moment she said it, everything around me went quiet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the glass. I simply looked at her. Then at him. Ryan gave me a small smile. The kind a man wears when he thinks he has already won. Claire leaned back in her chair, almost relieved. Daniel, don't make this ugly. I nodded once. I'm not. That answer surprised her. Maybe she expected begging. Maybe she expected me to fight for 12 years of marriage in front of a room full of strangers. But something inside me had already gone still. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 43 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believed loyalty was something you built slowly. Like a house. One board at a time. One promise at a time. Claire and I had started with almost nothing. Our first apartment smelled like old carpet and cheap coffee. We shared one battered sedan. We counted grocery receipts at the kitchen table because sometimes $20 mattered. Back then, Claire used to tell me I was the safest man she had ever known. With you, I never have to worry, she once said. I remembered that sentence while watching her smile at Ryan. Memories can be cruel that way. They don't disappear when the truth arrives. They just change color. I had spent 11 years building my construction consulting company. Long days. Cold mornings. Job sites before sunrise. Steel-toed boots, diesel fumes, concrete dust. Claire had watched it grow from a tiny operation with 2 employees into a company with contracts across 3 states. I thought she was proud of me. I thought we were building it together, even though the company was legally mine. Then Ryan appeared. He was younger, smoother, the kind of man who always looked like he had somewhere better to be. Claire started mentioning him casually. Ryan understands me. Ryan knows how to relax. Ryan doesn't make everything about work. I ignored it. I told myself jealousy was weakness. I trusted my wife. That was my mistake. The night of the anniversary dinner, Claire finally stopped pretending. She placed her napkin beside her plate and looked directly into my eyes. I'm choosing him. The words landed softly. Somehow that made them worse. I took a breath. Okay. Ryan shifted in his chair. Claire blinked. Okay? You made your choice. She looked almost disappointed. That's it. I stood slowly. My wedding ring suddenly felt heavier than steel. I looked at the woman I had loved for 12 years and realized I was no longer trying to convince her to stay. I'm going home, I said. Claire laughed under her breath. Daniel, don't be dramatic. You can't just walk away from everything. I stopped beside the table. Everything? She nodded. The house. The business. Our accounts. Our life. I looked at Ryan. He smiled again. Then I looked back at Claire. You're right. She relaxed. For 1 second. You can't walk away from everything. I reached into my coat, took out my phone, and checked the message waiting there from my accountant. The transfer had cleared that afternoon. The restructuring was complete. Ryan knew nothing about it. Claire knew even less. I put the phone away. But I can walk away from you. Her smile disappeared. I walked out into the cold night without another word. I didn't know yet how much Ryan owed. I didn't know how deeply Claire was already tied to his financial problems. I only knew one thing. She had chosen him because she thought he was better for her. What she didn't know was that the man she chose had already left a trail of debt behind him. And by morning, Claire was going to discover exactly who had been paying for his life. By sunrise, the man my wife chose had already started calling me. I woke before the alarm, the house dark and quiet, the words from the restaurant still sitting somewhere behind my ribs. He deserves you more. 6 words. 12 years gone. I stood in the kitchen with a cup of black coffee and watched the first light crawl across the countertops. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I wanted Claire back. Because something didn't make sense. Ryan had never built anything. He had never run a company, never owned property, never carried the kind of responsibility that makes you wake up at 3 in the morning calculating payroll. Yet Claire had looked at him like he was the future. Maybe love makes people blind. Or maybe it makes them see exactly what they want to see. I opened my phone. There were 3 missed calls from an unknown number. Then another came in. I answered. Daniel? It was Ryan. His voice was cautious now. Nothing like the confident man from the restaurant. How did you get my number? Silence. Then a breath. Claire gave it to me. I leaned against the counter. Why are you calling? Another pause. We need to talk. I almost smiled. About what? The business arrangement. My coffee stopped halfway to my mouth. What business arrangement? He didn't answer immediately. That told me enough. Claire had told him something. Probably more than she should have. Daniel, I don't want this to become hostile. Neither do I. Good. His voice relaxed slightly. Then maybe you can explain the debt situation. I set the cup down. The kitchen seemed colder. What debt situation? He hung up. I stared at the phone. That was the first crack. And once you see a crack, you stop admiring the wall. You start asking what's behind it. I called my accountant, Marcus, before 7. He answered on the second ring. You're up early. I need a full review of the company's structure. A pause. Something happened? Yes. I looked toward the hallway where Claire's shoes still sat beside the door. My wife chose another man. Silence. Marcus knew me well enough not to offer sympathy. Do you want the personal accounts included? Everything connected to the company. Legal entities. Guarantees. Joint obligations. Loans. I'll start now. I hung up. For the next 2 hours, I sat in my office while the sun climbed higher. Files appeared on my screen one by one. Corporate accounts. Equipment leases. Vendor contracts. Property records. Then Marcus called again. Daniel. His tone had changed. I found something. I straightened. What? Ryan's company has outstanding obligations tied to one of your old development projects. I frowned. Ryan doesn't own a company. He does now. I stared at the screen. A corporate registration appeared in front of me. Ryan's name. A company formed 14 months earlier. Claire had mentioned nothing. Marcus continued. The company has significant debt. How significant? He gave me the number. I said nothing. It was more than I expected. Far more. There's another problem, he said. Some of the financing was secured using personal guarantees. My chest tightened. Whose? Marcus hesitated. That's what I'm checking. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the neighborhood looked peaceful. Sprinklers clicked across lawns. A delivery truck rolled past. Ordinary morning. Nothing about it looked like the beginning of a financial collapse. Then my email chimed. One new document. I opened it. My name appeared on the first page. Not as a borrower. Not as a partner. As a guarantor. I read the line twice. Then a third time. I didn't remember signing it. That was when the room went still. Claire hadn't simply chosen Ryan. She had stepped into his life. And somehow, he had stepped into mine. I called Marcus back. Find out exactly how my name got there. I'm already on it. I looked at the document again. There was a signature beneath mine. It looked right. Almost perfect. Almost. But I knew my own signature. And that wasn't it. Someone had copied it. I closed the file. Something cold settled behind my ribs. This was no longer just a marriage ending. It was a financial trap. And I had a feeling Claire knew more about it than she had admitted. Your name was never supposed to be on that guarantee. Marcus said it quietly. I stared at the screen. The room did not move. My foundation did. I had spent years signing contracts, reviewing numbers, reading every line twice. Yet somehow, a signature that wasn't mine had appeared beneath a debt I never authorized. Marcus continued. I'm pulling the original filing now. I sat down slowly. My office smelled like coffee and paper. Familiar things. Solid things. They suddenly felt fragile. How did Ryan get access to your information? Marcus asked. He didn't. I looked toward the framed photograph on my desk. Claire and I at our wedding. 12 years younger. Smiling like nothing could touch us. Claire did. The thought landed like steel. I didn't want to believe it. But belief wasn't the point anymore. Evidence was. By noon, Marcus sent me the first batch of records. Ryan's company had been struggling almost from the beginning. Equipment loans. Commercial credit. Unpaid vendor balances. Private financing. The numbers climbed quickly. Then I saw Claire's name. Not as an owner. As an authorized contact. My chest tightened. She had been communicating with Ryan's lender for months. I opened one email. Daniel doesn't need to know about this yet. I read it again. Then another. Once the restructuring is complete, he'll have no choice. I leaned back. No shouting. No slammed desk. Just the quiet hum of the air conditioner, and the sound of my own breathing. That sentence changed everything. They hadn't simply fallen in love. They had been building something behind me. A plan. Maybe they thought they were building a future. Maybe they thought I was too distracted by work to notice. They were wrong. I called my attorney, Michael Grant. I need you to come over. He arrived 40 minutes later. I placed the documents on the table. He read them slowly. His expression barely changed. That was why I trusted him. This is serious, he said. I know. The guarantee appears fraudulent. Can it be enforced? Not if you didn't authorize it. But we need to move carefully. He pointed at the email. This is more important than the debt itself. Why? Because it establishes intent. Intent. One word. Heavy enough to change the room. Michael spent the next hour organizing everything into a timeline. Ryan's company formation. Claire's communications. Loan applications. Financial transfers. The questionable guarantee. Each piece looked harmless alone. Together, they formed a picture. A picture I never wanted to see. Around 3 o'clock, my phone rang. Claire. I watched her name glow on the screen. Once, seeing her name could change my entire day. Now it felt like an alarm. I answered. Hello? Where are you? Her voice sounded tense. At work. Ryan said you contacted his lender? I didn't. Silence. Then she exhaled. Daniel, please don't do anything stupid. Something inside me almost laughed. Stupid? This doesn't have to become a war. I agree. Then let it go. I looked at the documents spread across my desk. What exactly should I let go? She didn't answer. The debt? I asked. The guarantee? Silence. Or the fact that you knew about it? Her breathing changed. There it was. The microsecond of hesitation. The crack. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. I ended the call. Michael looked at me. You're not going to confront her? I shook my head. Not yet. He nodded. Good. Because the strongest evidence isn't the document you already understand. It's the document you haven't found yet. That evening, I searched the old company archives. Tax files. Property records. Loan agreements. Corporate resolutions. 3 hours passed. Then I found a folder labeled with a project number from 2 years earlier. Inside was a document I had never seen. My name appeared on the first page. Claire's name appeared beneath it. Ryan's company was listed as a beneficiary. I stopped breathing for a second. The debt wasn't connected to my company by accident. It had been routed through a structure Claire helped create. I turned the page. There was one final signature block. This time, I recognized the signature immediately. It was Claire's. And beneath it was a handwritten note. "He'll never notice." I stared at those 3 words until the letters blurred. Then I closed the folder. The room was silent. My anger was there. But it wasn't driving anymore. Something colder had taken its place. Clarity. I picked up my phone and called Michael. "I found it." "What did you find?" I looked at Claire's signature one last time. "The reason she was so certain I would lose." "You knew about the debt before you told me you loved him." I said it quietly. Claire looked at me across the conference table, and for the first time since our anniversary dinner, she had no answer. The room felt cold. Too cold for a summer afternoon. Michael sat beside me with a stack of documents arranged in perfect order. Claire sat opposite us with her attorney, Ryan nowhere in sight. That absence mattered. A man who had been so confident at dinner was suddenly missing when the paperwork arrived. I placed the folder on the table. "I found the project file." Claire's eyes dropped to it. Her face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. A tightening around her mouth. A pause before she breathed. I had learned to notice those things. "Daniel," she said, "you do not understand what happened." "Then explain it." Silence. Her attorney reached for the folder. Michael stopped him. "You can review copies after we establish the chain of documents." Her attorney looked annoyed. Michael did not move. "Facts first." I almost smiled. That was why I had hired him. No shouting. No threats. Just facts. Michael opened the first page. It showed the development project from 2 years earlier. My company had provided consulting services. Ryan's newly formed company had supplied equipment. At least, that was how the paperwork looked. But the structure was more complicated. Ryan's company had borrowed heavily against projected revenue. My company had been listed as a secondary guarantor on one document. I had never authorized it. Then Michael placed another page beside it. A corporate resolution. My name appeared at the bottom. Again, the signature looked like mine. Again, it was not. Claire stared at the page. "I thought you approved that." I looked at her. "You thought?" She swallowed. "Ryan told me everything was temporary." There it was. Not denial. Explanation. "How long?" I asked. "How long did you know about the debt?" She looked down. "A few months." My chest tightened. A few months. While she had been sitting beside me at breakfast. While she had been telling me she felt distant from our marriage. While she had been telling Ryan he deserved her more. She had known. She had chosen him anyway. I did not raise my voice. "Did you help him get the financing?" Claire's eyes lifted. "I only introduced him to someone." Michael looked at me. I said nothing. He opened another document. An email. Claire's name. Ryan's name. A lender's name. The subject line read, "Guarantee Structure, Final Review." Claire's attorney leaned forward. "Where did you get this?" Michael answered. "From the archived company records." Claire's face went pale. I remembered something from our marriage. Claire always said she hated paperwork. She used to joke that contracts made her eyes hurt. But now I was looking at months of emails she had carefully written about loans, guarantees, and asset transfers. She had not hated paperwork. She had simply hated paperwork when it belonged to our marriage. "Why?" I asked. She looked at me. "Why would you do this?" Her eyes filled. "Because I thought you would never understand." "Understand what?" She took a breath. "That I wanted something different." The answer hurt. But it was honest. Finally. "You could have left," I said. "You did not have to involve my company." She looked away. Ryan needed help. I nodded slowly. And I didn't? Her face collapsed. No answer. That was the answer. Michael placed the final document on the table. It was the restructuring agreement I had authorized weeks before Claire demanded the divorce. The agreement removed my company from future obligations connected to Ryan's business and formally separated several assets from any personal guarantees that had not been authorized by me. That was the transfer I had mentioned to Marcus. The move was already complete. Ryan's debt was no longer attached to the assets Claire believed she could claim through our marriage. Claire stared at the page. You knew this was coming. No. I paused. I knew something was wrong. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. So you protected yourself? Yes. And left me with him. I held her gaze. You chose him. The words were quiet. They were not revenge. They were simply the truth. Claire lowered her head. Her attorney whispered something to her. She did not respond. Outside the conference room, footsteps moved down the hallway. Inside, the silence pressed harder. Then Claire's phone vibrated. She looked at the screen. Her expression changed instantly. She answered. Hello? I watched her face while she listened. No words. Just breathing. Then she whispered, What do you mean the account is frozen? Her attorney looked up sharply. Claire stood. Ryan, where are you? She listened again. Then her hand began to shake. I knew before she said it. Ryan had not called to explain. He had called because the first consequences had arrived. Claire slowly lowered the phone. Her eyes met mine. He says the lender is demanding payment. I nodded once. Then he should talk to his lender. She stared at me. Daniel, please. That word again. Please. The word that used to pull me back. This time, it did not move me. Because she had made her choice. And now, for the first time, she was going to live with it. The debt is not the worst part, Daniel. Your wife signed something else. Michael said it without changing his expression. I looked at him across the conference table. Claire was still staring at her phone, frozen after Ryan's call. Her attorney had stopped taking notes. The room felt warm, but the silence was cold. What did she sign? I asked. Michael opened a second folder. We found this in the lender's supplemental records. He placed the document on the table. Claire looked at it and immediately shook her head. No. One word. Too fast. I looked at her. You recognize it? I said no. Her attorney reached for the page. Michael pushed a copy toward him. Read it. He did. His eyes moved slowly across the first paragraph, then stopped halfway down. Claire, he said quietly, you need to explain this. She didn't. I picked up the document. It was a personal acknowledgement connected to Ryan's financing. Claire had represented that certain financial resources would remain available during the repayment period. One of those resources was tied to assets we had acquired during our marriage. My assets. Assets she had assumed she could help leverage because she believed they were already part of the life she was taking with her. But there was more. At the bottom was her signature. Genuine this time. No forgery. No ambiguity. She had signed it herself. My fingers tightened around the paper. When? I asked. She looked away. Last year. Last year. The phrase hit harder than I expected. While we were celebrating birthdays. While we were visiting family. While she was sleeping beside me. She had been making promises to another man's creditors. I put the paper down. Did you tell Ryan I would cover this? Claire swallowed. I told him you would not let him fail. I nodded slowly. You decided that for me. I thought you loved me. That sentence almost broke something in me. Not because it was cruel. Because it was familiar. Love had become her justification for everything. She had used my trust as a financial instrument. She had confused marriage with permission. Michael closed the folder. The good news is that Daniel's restructuring was completed before the current dispute escalated. Claire looked at him. So what happens to Ryan? Michael answered. That depends on Ryan. The phone in Claire's hand vibrated again. She looked down. This time, she didn't answer. A message appeared on the screen. They are coming for the collateral. Call me. Her face went pale. I looked away. I didn't need to see more. The consequences had finally crossed the distance between paper and reality. Claire stood abruptly. I need to go. Her attorney caught her arm. Where? To find Ryan. I almost stopped her. Almost. Then I remembered the restaurant. Her hand beside his. Her calm voice. He deserves you more. I let her go. After she left, Michael remained seated. You okay? I looked at the empty chair. No. It was the first time I had admitted it out loud. But I will be. He nodded. That was enough. The next week moved quickly. Ryan's lenders demanded payment. His company missed another obligation. Several vendors suspended work. The man who had smiled across from me at our anniversary dinner suddenly stopped answering calls. Claire began calling me every morning. I didn't answer. Not because I wanted revenge. Because every conversation pulled me back into a life I had already decided to leave. Then, on Friday afternoon, she sent one message. Please meet me once. I need to tell you the truth. I stared at it for a long time. There are moments when silence is strength. There are other moments when silence becomes avoidance. I agreed. We met at the same restaurant where she had chosen Ryan. Same corner table. Same soft lighting. Different people. Claire arrived alone. No attorney. No Ryan. No confidence. She sat across from me and placed a small envelope on the table. I should have told you everything, she said. I didn't touch the envelope. Then tell me. Her eyes filled with tears. Ryan didn't just need money. She took a breath. He needed someone who could make you trust him. The room seemed to shrink. What did he plan? I asked. Claire looked at me. He planned to use our marriage to get access to your company. That was the sentence I had been waiting for. The debt was real. The affair was real. But they had both been pieces of something larger. Claire lowered her voice. And I helped him. I stared at her. The woman I had loved for 12 years finally stopped defending herself. She opened the envelope. Inside was a copy of an email thread. One line was highlighted. I read it. Then I looked at her. The anger was gone. What remained was colder. Certainty. Ryan had never wanted Claire more than he wanted what came with her. And now Claire finally understood the difference. You were never the one he wanted, Claire. You were the door he needed me to open. I said it quietly. She looked down at the email in her hands, and something inside her finally cracked. The restaurant was almost empty now. The dinner crowd had thinned, leaving only the low hum of the kitchen and the soft clink of glasses behind the bar. 12 years of marriage sat between us like wreckage. Claire wiped beneath one eye. I thought he loved me. I looked at her. Did he ever ask you for anything that didn't involve money? She didn't answer. That silence told me enough. She slid the envelope toward me. Inside were printed messages between Ryan and several people involved in his company. I read them slowly. Dates. Numbers. Meetings. Names. Then one line stopped me. Once Daniel transfers control of the equipment division, the debt can be rolled into the new entity. I read it again. Claire watched my face. I didn't know what that meant. But you knew they were discussing my company. Yes. Her voice broke. I knew. The truth finally had a shape. Ryan hadn't simply wanted Claire. He had wanted access. My company had equipment, contracts, credit, and assets that made his collapsing business look healthier than it was. Claire had been the bridge. I closed my eyes for a moment. I remembered her sitting beside me at home, asking innocent questions about expansion. Which division made the most money? Which equipment was owned outright? Which contracts renewed automatically? At the time, I thought she was interested in my work. She wasn't. She was collecting information. Michael leaned forward. Daniel, there is another issue. He pulled a document from his briefcase. The lender has initiated a formal review. Claire looked at him. What does that mean? It means they believe the guarantees and representations may have been connected to a broader scheme. Her face went pale. Are you saying Ryan could be charged? Michael was careful. I'm saying the authorities may become interested. Claire stared at me. You didn't do this. No, you reported him. I shook my head. I provided documents when they were requested. That distinction mattered. I hadn't invented anything. I hadn't fabricated evidence. I hadn't ruined Ryan's business. I had simply stopped protecting a man who had built his future around my trust. Claire lowered her head into her hands. What am I supposed to do? I watched her for a long moment. Once, I would have answered immediately. I would have fixed the problem. Called the bank. Called the lawyer. Paid the bill. Taken responsibility. That's what husbands do, I used to think. But marriage isn't supposed to mean becoming someone's shield from every consequence they create. You need your own attorney, I said. She looked up. Will you help me? The question hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted to help. Because I remembered how often she had once asked me the same thing. I'm not your husband anymore, Claire. Her face tightened. We aren't divorced yet. We're already finished. The words were quiet. Final. She looked toward the window. Outside, headlights moved through the rain, red and white streaks across wet pavement. I never thought you'd leave me like this. I almost smiled. You left me first. She nodded slowly. No argument. No defense. Just acceptance. Before we separated that night, she asked one last question. Was there ever a point when you wanted revenge? I thought about it. Yes. Her eyes lifted. And? Then I realized revenge would keep me tied to you. She looked down. So what did you do? I stood. I protected what was mine. Then I walked away. I left her at the table. The next morning, Ryan's company officially defaulted on several obligations. His accounts were restricted pending review. The lender's investigation widened. Claire hired an attorney and stopped contacting me directly. For the first time in months, my phone was quiet. No desperate calls. No accusations. No requests. Just silence. I returned to my office and looked at the company floor through the glass. Men and women moved between desks. Phones rang. Printers hummed. Trucks rolled into the loading area. Everything continued. I had almost lost it because I trusted the wrong people. But I hadn't lost it. I had protected it in time. That afternoon, Marcus brought me the final financial report. You're clear, he said. The unauthorized guarantees have been removed from your obligations, and the restructuring is complete. I nodded. Good. He hesitated. What about Claire? I looked at the report. Then at the empty chair across my office. That's not my account anymore. He understood. I closed the folder. The chapter was ending. But I didn't know yet that Claire would call me one final time. Not for money. Not for Ryan. Not even for forgiveness. She would call because she had finally discovered the one thing Ryan never intended to give her. The truth. And when she heard it, she would realize exactly what she had traded away. The woman you married is gone, Daniel. Claire said it over the phone. And I think I finally understand why. I stood alone in my office, watching rain move across the windows. For a moment I said nothing. Her voice sounded different. There was no anger in it. No accusation. Just exhaustion. Why are you calling? I asked. She breathed slowly. Because I found something. My hand rested on the edge of the desk. What? Ryan kept another set of records. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Men who build their lives on deception rarely stop at one lie. Where? I asked. In a storage unit. Her voice trembled. His attorney gave me access after the lender froze his accounts. I said nothing. Daniel, the records show everything. She paused. Including what he planned to do after the divorce. That caught my attention. Tell me. He planned to convince me to pressure you into transferring part of the company. I looked down at the financial report Marcus had left on my desk. And then? Then he planned to use the company assets to refinance his debt. I slowly sat down. The final piece had arrived. Ryan didn't just want access to my company. He wanted to make his debt my problem. Claire had been useful because she was my wife. Once the divorce began, he expected her to become the leverage. I asked, "Did you know?" "Not all of it." Her voice cracked. "But I knew enough to suspect." I stared at the rain. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I thought you were the enemy." That sentence stayed in the room after she said it. I understood then that betrayal is rarely just one person's mistake. Sometimes two people convince themselves that the person protecting them is actually the person hurting them. Claire had believed Ryan's version of me. The controlling husband. The obsessed businessman. The man who would never let her become independent. She had wanted freedom. Ryan had offered it. What he actually offered was a cage with better lighting. "Where are the records now?" I asked. "With my attorney." "Then give them to the authorities." Silence. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "Even if it hurts me?" "Especially then." She started crying quietly. I waited. "Daniel," she whispered, "I lost everything." I looked around my office. The company was still here. My employees were still here. The work was still here. But I knew what she meant. She had lost the marriage. The trust. The future she thought she was choosing. "No," I said. "You lost what you were willing to trade away." She didn't answer. I continued. "You still have a chance to build something honest." "Without you?" "Yes." Her breathing became uneven. "I thought you would want me to suffer." I looked out at the city. "I wanted you to understand." That was the difference. Revenge wants pain. Truth wants clarity. 2 days later, the new records were submitted. The investigation expanded. Ryan's financial dealings were examined in detail. His company collapsed under the weight of obligations it could no longer hide. Claire cooperated fully. She returned documents, explained communications, and accepted responsibility for the part she had played. She didn't walk away untouched. There were legal consequences and financial consequences. But she stopped trying to escape them. That mattered. Our divorce was finalized several months later. There was no courtroom explosion. No dramatic speech. No last-minute attempt to win me back. Just signatures. Papers. Silence. The final settlement followed the actual ownership records and the agreements that had been in place. My company remained mine. The unauthorized obligations were removed. Claire kept what was legitimately hers. Ryan kept his debts. And I kept something I hadn't realized I had almost lost. Myself. On the day everything became official, Claire stood beside the courthouse steps. Winter sunlight reflected off the glass buildings behind her. She looked older than she had a year earlier. Not physically. Emotionally. "Daniel." I stopped. I wanted to say goodbye. I nodded. "Goodbye, Claire." She smiled sadly. "You really don't hate me?" "No, why?" I thought about the restaurant. Her hand beside Ryan's. The sentence that had started everything. "He deserves you more." "Because hate would mean I still want something from you." Her eyes filled with tears. She nodded. Then she walked away. I watched until she disappeared into the crowd. I didn't follow. I didn't call her name. I simply turned in the opposite direction and started walking. The city was loud around me. Cars. Voices. Footsteps. Life. For 12 years, I had thought walking away meant losing. That day, I finally understood. Sometimes walking away is the first time you choose yourself. And Claire had chosen Ryan because she believed he deserved her more. In the end, I didn't leave her with his debts. I left her with something much heavier. The responsibility for her own choices. And for the first time, that was enough. The hardest part was not losing Claire. It was realizing I had spent years protecting someone who was willing to risk everything I built. 3 months after the divorce, my life had become quiet again. Not empty. Quiet. There is a difference. I woke before sunrise, drove to the office, checked project reports, walked the construction floor, and went home without wondering where Claire was or who she was with. For the first time in years, my schedule belonged to me. The company was stable. The legal mess was behind me. Ryan's debts were no longer attached to my business. The forged guarantee had been formally dismissed, and the remaining financial disputes were being handled between Ryan, his lenders, and the people who had actually signed the agreements. I thought that would be the end. It wasn't. One Tuesday morning, Marcus walked into my office holding a thin envelope. "This came for you." I looked at it. No return address. My chest tightened for half a second. Old habits. Old fear. Then I opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Claire. I almost put it back. Instead, I read the first line. "I finally understand what I did." I kept reading. She wrote about the months before the divorce. About how Ryan had convinced her that I cared more about the company than the marriage. About how he made my discipline look like control and my silence look like weakness. She admitted that she had wanted a life that felt easier. She wanted someone who made her feel admired without asking her to understand what it cost. Ryan gave her that illusion. Then the bills arrived. The calls started. The accounts froze. The promises disappeared. She finally saw what I had seen from the beginning. Ryan had not been offering her a better life. He had been borrowing one. The letter ended with a sentence that stayed with me. "You were never the man I needed to escape from. You were the man I should have protected." I folded the paper carefully. Marcus watched me. "You want me to destroy it?" I shook my head. "No, keep it?" "Maybe." He nodded and left. I placed the letter in a drawer. Not because I wanted Claire back. Because some truths deserve a place to exist without controlling your future. That afternoon, I walked through the warehouse. Machines moved. Steel beams waited beneath fluorescent lights. Men shouted measurements across the floor. The smell of dust and metal filled the air. This was the world I had built before Claire ever decided I was not enough. And for the first time, I understood something important. My company had never been the reason our marriage failed. My ambition had not betrayed her. My work had not lied to her. People made choices. I had made mine. She had made hers. Ryan had made his. Consequences simply arrived later than the choices. That evening, I drove home and stopped at a small grocery store. I bought steak, vegetables, and a bottle of wine. Simple things. Ordinary things. I cooked for myself without checking the clock or wondering whether someone else would approve. The kitchen was still the same. Same counters. Same windows. Same soft yellow light. But it no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like mine. My phone buzzed while I was cooking. Unknown number. I looked at it. For a second, the old instinct returned. Answer it. Fix it. Explain. Then I remembered the restaurant. Claire's voice. "He deserves you more." I turned the phone face down. I did not answer. No anger. No shaking hands. Just silence. Later that night, I opened the drawer and looked at her letter one more time. I could have hated her. Some days I almost did. But hate is heavy. I had carried enough weight. So I folded the letter and put it away. Not as a promise. Not as a memory. as proof that I had survived the version of myself who believed love meant accepting anything. The next morning, I went back to work. The sun rose over the city, turning the glass buildings gold. Trucks moved along the highway. Coffee steamed beside my laptop. Everything looked ordinary. And maybe that was the victory. Not making Claire regret leaving. Not watching Ryan lose everything. Not proving that I was better than either of them. The victory was waking up without needing their regret to feel whole. I had spent years building a life for two people. Now I was finally learning how to build one for myself. And somewhere along the way, I realized the title of my story had never really been about the debts Ryan left behind. It was about the debt I owed myself. The promise to stop abandoning my own dignity just to keep someone else comfortable. I had paid it. In full. And this time, I walked forward with nothing chasing me. I thought leaving you meant I was choosing a better life. Claire said it softly. I did not realize I was choosing a life built on someone else's lies. I stood beside the courthouse steps and listened. The wind moved through the bare trees above us. Winter had settled over the city, turning every breath into a pale cloud. A year earlier, I would have given anything to hear her say those words. Now they simply sounded like the final page of a story that had already ended. Our divorce had been finalized months before. The financial investigation was nearly complete. Ryan's company was gone, buried beneath obligations he could no longer hide. Claire had accepted responsibility for the documents she signed and the information she withheld. She had lost money. She had lost her marriage. But she had not lost everything. She had something I had once thought impossible for either of us to recover. The truth. She looked at me. Do you remember our first apartment? I smiled faintly. The one with the broken heater? And the window that would not close. And the refrigerator that sounded like it was dying. She laughed through the tears. For a moment, the years disappeared. We were young again. Broke. Tired. Happy. Then the memory faded. Warm past. Cold reality. I loved you then, she said. I know. I loved you later too. I looked at her carefully. But you stopped respecting me. Her eyes dropped. Yes. That honesty mattered. Maybe because there was nothing left to gain from lying. I thought Ryan made me feel free, she continued. He made you feel important. She nodded. Yes. Those are different things. I know that now. We stood in silence. Cars passed behind us. People crossed the courthouse plaza carrying folders and coffee, moving toward other problems, other endings. Life does not stop because one marriage does. That was something I had learned the hard way. Claire reached into her coat and pulled out a small envelope. I wanted you to have this. I took it. Inside was my old wedding photograph. The one I had kept on my desk for years. Why? I asked. Because I do not want to keep pretending that the entire marriage was a mistake. I looked at the photograph. Two younger people smiling at a future they could not see. It was not a mistake, I said. It was real. Her eyes filled again. Even after everything? Especially after everything. She nodded slowly. There was no reconciliation. No dramatic kiss. No promise to start again. Some endings should stay endings. We had become two people who knew too much about each other to go back and pretend nothing had happened. But forgiveness did not require returning. Peace did not require forgetting. I handed the photograph back. Keep it. She looked surprised. You do not want it? I shook my head. I remember enough. She smiled sadly. You always were better at letting go than I was. I almost corrected her. I had not always been good at letting go. I had simply learned when holding on became another form of losing myself. She turned toward the street. Daniel? Yes? He never loved me. I said nothing. He loved what I could give him. Her voice was barely audible. And I thought that was enough. I looked at her. You know the difference now. Yes. She took a breath. That is the part one have to live with. She walked away. I watched her disappear into the winter crowd. I did not chase her. I did not call her name. I did not need the last word. I had already said everything that mattered by choosing not to become cruel. That evening, I drove home alone. The city lights reflected across the windshield. My house was quiet when I entered. Not lonely. Quiet. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window. For years, I had believed the greatest victory would be watching Claire regret choosing Ryan. I was wrong. The real victory was no longer needing her regret. Ryan's debts had never become mine. Claire had eventually learned that. But there was another debt I had carried for years. The debt I owed myself for ignoring every warning because I was afraid of losing the woman I loved. That debt was finally paid. I turned off the kitchen light and walked upstairs. Tomorrow, I would wake early. I would go to work. I would build another project. Maybe someday I would love someone again. Maybe I would not. I did not need to know yet. For now, I had something better than revenge. I had peace. My wife once said, "He deserves me more." She was right about one thing. Ryan deserved the consequences of his choices. Claire deserved the consequences of hers. And I deserved the freedom to stop carrying both of them. So I left the past where it belonged. Behind me. Not with anger. Not with bitterness. Just silence. And for the first time in 12 years, the silence felt like freedom.